this is Faith at Faith and Books, and I'm going to do a Friday wrap up, and it's almost a March wrap up. But I'll just talk about, I managed to get more reading done this week than I did last, and I sort of, just by chance, sort of followed the middle grade, middle grade March. Unintentionally, it just sort of happened that way. So earlier this month, I read, It's Gonna Come to Me, The Secret Garden. That was lovely. And I've also been reading Eagle Against the Sun, which is about World War II in the Pacific. And I think I'm about 34. I mean, this is slow. It says 30%, but now on my Kindle app, it says I'm further along. I just finished the Battle of Guadalcanal, and how that was horrific. And the Navy and the Army are both figuring out how to fight in the Pacific on these various islands. And it's really sort of the turnaround when they realize that Japan, well, maybe midway is when they realized that Japan wasn't, they could defeat Japan. Because at first, Japan was so powerful and just winning battle after battle. But Guadalcanal just took so much out of them, out of the military, that I think the author said it was about 18 months before they fought again. They had to just go and regroup and figure out what they were doing. And one of the big problems that they had was that our planes were not as good as the Japanese planes. The Japanese had a plane called Zero, and one of them crash landed on one of the Aleutian Islands where a battle took place, and they managed to ship it off to, I guess, Washington or wherever they were designing these planes. And that's the type of plane that my father wound up flying. Was it a Hellcat or Wildcat? I have to look up what he flew. I always forget what it was. There were two different types. He did the F6F Hellcat or Wildcat. I don't know. I'll look that up. But anyway, it was based on that Japanese model. But we had like the B-27s, B-29s, and they were not accurate when it came to dropping bombs. So they would drop a lot of bombs, but it wouldn't have much effect. But then after Guadalcanal, when they sort of regrouped to figure out their strategies, they got a new guy in. They were always switching people in and out. And this was an Army guy. I think it was the Army Air Force, because I guess the Air Force wasn't separate. See, that's how little I know. I think that the Air Force was still part of the Army. General Kenny, and he figured out that they were just flying too high and that they had to learn flying techniques to get in lower. So, and that made it a lot more effective. Anyway, they really learned a lot from Guadalcanal, but it really took a huge chunk out of their resources, and they had to pull back and really regroup. And that's where I am in that book. It's absolutely fascinating. I think it's not easy reading, again, like The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. The book, I think, is 624 or 34 pages long or something, and I'm about 34% through. So I've been reading that off and on. And I read The Secret Garden earlier, and then I read, what did I read before this? Oh, I read The Bronze Bow. I don't have that with me. And that was, about a young man in oppressive circumstances. And there was something about that vibe that was kind of therapeutic in this time of coronavirus and being worried so much about contracting it or accidentally giving it to somebody. And everyone's home, and you're either stressed out because you're working from home. My husband's working from home, and it's made everything twice as hard to get done. So it's really stressful. And then, or people losing their jobs, like my youngest son, or he just hasn't gotten started. He had just gotten hired, and I guess he's just on hold. But other people have lost their jobs. And then, or people are still going out to work, and then you're worried about them contracting it when they go out, like two people in my household. So anyway, it's just kind of been stressful. So the way I've been dealing with it is reading these middle grade books. And after The Bronze Bow, I read this one because I was planting potatoes last week, and also it was, St. Patrick's Day. So Black Potatoes, the story of the Great Irish Famine, 1845 to 1850. Susan Campbell Bartoletti, excellent book. She strikes just the right tone. It's not too gruesome or grisly or inflamed, but she very even-handed tone, just relaying the facts, and she doesn't go into too much gory detail, but there's enough there that you feel the significance of everything that was going on. And what's really charming is that she used these were actually illustrations from newspapers of the time. So there were reproductions of those. And she mentions people like Maria Edgeworth and Thackeray. So it's very, very interesting, very well written. I appreciated it a lot. It's full of facts, well told, just right for middle grade level. So I understand why it won an award. She did a very, very good job talking about a very difficult topic. And then while I was cleaning through my study, all the books there, and I was in this mood for Japanese or just sort of Pacific themed books because of the Eagle Against the Sun book, I stumbled on this book, So Far from the Bamboo Grove, by Yoko Kawashima Watkins. And I bought this years ago at a library sale, and I don't think any of my kids ever read it. And I hadn't read it, it just sat on the shelf. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Well, it was absolutely fascinating. It's her memoir of when she was 11 years old in 1945. Her father was like a civil servant in the Japanese government that had taken over Manchuria. I think they called it Manchukuo. But they weren't living there. They were living just over the border in Korea, and the Japanese had also taken over Korea. I think she explains it in they had been controlling Korea for a while, and so she didn't really feel any of the effects of World War II until the very end, 1945. Everything started crashing down. The Japanese were losing, and then they were defeated. And the Russians came in and they were supporting the Communist Party. And so they had to get out. And her father, you don't really hear much about her father, but her father was imprisoned in Siberia for 6 years before he got released. But her mother and her brother had gone to work at factories, I think a munitions factory or something. But she and her older sister and her mother luckily were warned by a friend, he turned out to be a really good friend, that the Russians were coming. And so they escaped at like 11 o'clock at night. They just packed up all their things, some food and papers and things really fast. And then they had to get to the train station. They had to finagle their way onto a hospital train that was leaving at 3 a.m. or something in the morning. And so they had to pretend they were sick. And it was absolutely harrowing, just absolutely harrowing, this escape when the country's just falling apart. And there's just roving gangs, and it's these three women, the two young girls, I think her sister's 14 and she's 11, and her mother, trying to get through absolutely horrific what they went through. I mean, it must have traumatized her for the rest of her life. It's amazing. She could tell the story really bad. But again, I mean, and this one's harsher than the Black Potatoes, that's for sure. She's remembering stuff that really happened. But it has a good resolution because, of course, she lived to tell the tale. But the funny thing was, while I was reading this, it reminded me of another book that I knew I had that I don't think any of my kids ever read, but had been sitting on the shelf for years, and it was by Jean Fritz. Homesick, My Own Story. Jean Fritz is a middle grade writer who writes lots and lots of popular history books, and we've used many of her books, and we really like her. But I had never read this, and so I thought, this book is reminding me of this book, so I decided I'd make that the next one to read. And then I didn't look at the introduction to this book when I started reading it. It's got a nice map, Korea and Japan. But the foreword, I know this was actually written by Jean Fritz. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, I just finished reading this today. Excellent. Again, her family also had to flee, this time from China. Her father was the director of the YMCA in Hangzhou. Am I saying that right? I don't think it's called that anymore. That was the old name. This was back in 1927. And the communists have started to take over, so they have to flee. The Civil War has come to their area of China. And it's just a riveting story of how they get out. It's not as dramatic. They aren't quite as in much danger. They're ahead of the hordes that are coming after them. So they do get out, but it's just about her life growing up in China. She had never been in America. She was born and raised in China, and now she's also 11, same age as Far from the Bamboo Grove. And she, just what her life was like and how they got out, and then what coming home to America was, to Washington, PA, to her grandmother, whom she had never met, but she'd been writing letters to her for years, and to their farm. So just wonderfully told, excellent writer, highly recommend it. It was really good. So that was my middle grade March reads, and now I realize that I only have a few days in which to read Eight Cousins by Louisa May Alcott. That's the book for A Year with Louisa May, so I'm going to get started on that pretty soon. So I guess I'll talk to you later. I'll come back with the unexpectedly homeschooling video, maybe on Sunday. Anyway, take care, stay healthy, and I'll see you later. Bye.